Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome back Muhamad Aly Rifai, internist, psychiatrist, and addiction medicine specialist. Today's Kevin MD article is an excerpt from his book titled Doctor Not Guilty. The excerpt is titled Physician Legal Rights, What to Do When Agents Knock. Muhamad, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me to talk a little bit about my book, Doctor Not Guilty, and some of the lessons that I learned from my experience facing a prosecution for healthcare fraud by the federal government, and some of the advice that I can provide to fellow physicians in terms of interactions with law enforcement, investigative agencies, state boards, something that they really need to keep in mind in this litigious world that we live in.
All right. And I know you've shared your story in prior episodes, but for those who aren't familiar with your story, just give us a little bit of context. Just briefly tell us what happened to you.
So in 2017, I faced an investigation by the federal government. And in 2022, I was indicted on four charges of healthcare fraud, mostly stemming from telehealth, telemedicine, telepsychiatry services that I provided to elderly individuals in rural Pennsylvania. The argument from the federal government was that the services that I provided were just med checks, and there was no talking with the patient, no psychotherapy. I decided to go to trial, and after a 6-day trial, the jury came back in 2 hours and found me not guilty on all charges. That led me to actually write my book, which is Doctor Not Guilty, where I talk about my experience. It's a memoir about my experience going through federal criminal prosecution. I also tell the story of other physicians who face similar circumstances being prosecuted by the federal government and the course of what happened to them, and provide some guidance, not as an attorney, but as a fellow physician, of how to deal with such circumstances. And in this kind of litigious society and the court system, I tell people exactly what I learned from this experience and how they can stay on the positive side of the law.
Now, in the midst of this entire story, how did you know to do what you did? Like, where did you get advice from? Because I could only imagine as you were going through the process, it's not like you had any training in this. How did you know what to do, and how did you know what you did was right?
I had interest in the law, so I think I was lucky because I had interest in the law. For the 15 years prior to this investigation starting, I was actually a psychiatric expert witness, and I testified in court on many occasions for cases that even involved the death penalty. I was actually an expert witness in 2 cases that were involving the death penalty. So I was basically very well involved and very well versed in the legal field. And I think that helped me a lot. And I try to see if I can impart or transmit some of that knowledge that I gained through my legal involvement as an expert witness. And I think that helped me a lot, being able to having that knowledge, being a defendant, maybe a model defendant that was able to do everything by the book, everything the right way, and not kind of have any of the pitfalls of the legal system, because the legal system is unforgiving. If somebody doesn't know the rules, basically they will suffer negative consequences.
So, talk to us more about this article in your book. What are some do's and don'ts physicians should and should not do should they find themselves in this situation?
So if any, I tell that in the book. If anybody is going to come with one message from my book, that should be to never talk to the police. And by the police, I mean investigators, I mean government investigators, I mean Board of Medicine investigators, police, FBI, Office of Inspector General, Department of Health and Human Services, the Drug Enforcement Agency. All of these law enforcement officials may interact or come in contact with physicians and may ask physicians to talk to them, may ask physicians to sign papers. The Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution exists for a reason. It is to protect you from self-incrimination. And self-incrimination is basically you may have done nothing wrong, but providing any statement to that could be construed in a negative way. And we are physicians. So in our training, we're trained to talk to people. We're trained to try to convince people to do something, to take their medications, to have a diet. So we are basically people pleasers. And so what happens is basically physicians will start talking to law enforcement officers, police, FBI, Office Inspector General, state board investigators, and start offering information. And most of the time, these interviews are never recorded. And basically, it is your version versus the officers who are there who write their own version of events. And basically, what ends up happening is you provide statements that are not going to be helpful for you, regardless of what you think that you're providing. So my only advice is never talk to the police. If they come to you, they want to talk to you, the professional thing to do is to say, I hear you. I understand you want to talk to me, but I want to discuss this with my attorney. I do not want to speak with you. I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. And you really have to verbalize that, and I would like to talk to my attorney. Let anything that you submit to the government, to investigators, be through your attorney, not through you, not through any statements that you make. Because anything that you make, any statements that you make, any papers you submit, basically, these are all things that are going to be used against you. It's not would be against you. They are going to be used against you. They're going to be misconstrued. They're going to be used against you. And so not providing any statements, even if in the future there's a decision that something wrong was done and you want to provide a statement, let that be through your attorney, not with anything that you say.
What would be an example of something that would be seemingly innocuous that you would disclose to the authorities that could be used against the physician? What would be just an example of that?
So, for example, I give a story of a local family physician who basically talked to government investigators, and he told them that he met up with a patient, and the patient was delayed and needed his medication. And the patient was a chronic pain patient who needed opiates, but he was being prescribed appropriately. But he told them that he waited for the patient to come after hours because he was delayed with traffic. And what that was construed as that this physician was diverting controlled substances after hours to patients. And basically that was the headline that was construed. And the physician actually had no recourse toward that and actually had to plead guilty for drug diversion, even though what that he did was legal and appropriate, and there was no diversion, but only that statement that he gave to investigators that he waited till after hours, and it became that he was diverting controlled substances to patients after hours.
Now, you see in the movies, the authorities can use a variety of tactics to get you to talk to them, right? So give us an example. Is it like the movies? Like what are some of the techniques that authorities can use to get you to talk to them without your attorney present?
Doctor, we're agent so and so, and we're here from the government, and we just have few questions. We're hoping that you can clear these things for us. There's nothing against you. You're not in any danger. There's no charges against you or anything like that. We just have few questions for you. Maybe you can clarify things for us. And basically, that is the slippery slope. They lull you into basically comfort that you are not under an investigation. And the police is allowed to lie to you. They tell you you're not under any investigation. Everything is clear. They just need to clarify things And basically, that's basically the beginning of the end for you, because once you start talking, basically all of the information is going to be misconstrued and it's going to be taken against you. In my book, I actually tell the story of a very famous person. He was a national security advisor for the president. His name is General Michael Flynn. Now, General Michael Flynn, for those who don't know him, he was the head of military intelligence. His job was to interrogate Al Qaeda people and basically to break them and get information from them. Even he was lulled into comfort because the FBI, when he was national security advisor, came to the White House and they interviewed him and they used the same tricks. General Flynn, we just have a few questions for you. And basically, they didn't get him on any illegal issues. They just got him on making false statements to the authority. And basically, if he says something that he didn't remember right, and there was a documentation, for example, that he was somewhere that at one time and he was there at a different time, that's a false statement to the federal investigators, and that by itself is a crime. So they never got him on anything. They just got him on making a false statement. So I tell physicians, if General Michael Flynn, they got him, you should not talk to police or investigators at any time.
So just to be clear, even if the authorities come to you and say you're not under an investigation, you're not under any suspicion, that can certainly change going forward, right? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, because you could make a statement and then you become under investigation and you have no protection of anything. Even sometimes, we have seen that even sometimes when you provide a statement, even through your lawyer, if the government thinks that that statement is false, they could charge you with making false statements, even through your lawyer. A senator who was indicted and is actually now in jail, Senator Menendez, submitted some information to the government trying to clear himself. And even that, the government charged him with submitting false statements, even through his lawyer, because they perceived that he was trying to give them false statements. So always, it's very important to discuss everything with the lawyer before providing any statements. And that's professionalism. And always be very courteous. That there's no need to be inappropriate, just very courteous. Officer, I understand you're doing an investigation. I really want to cooperate. You're going to get my full cooperation, but I want to do this cooperation through my attorney. I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. I'm going to discuss with my attorney, and we will get back to you. And so you do the interview on your own time and on your own comfort after you studied exactly what is being investigated. If there's going to be an interview or you're going to provide any information to the police or the authorities. And, sometimes that sometimes upsets the officers because their impression is that they want to talk to you and get it over with and get things done and move on with this investigation. But you need to protect your rights. So always talk only with your attorney and never talk to the police alone.
So let's talk about next steps. You said don't talk to the authorities, invoke your Fifth Amendment rights, then call your attorney. What kind of attorney should you call?
So I actually give multiple talks about that. It is very, very important to choose an appropriate attorney. You don't want the attorney, for example, that writes your will. You don't want the attorney that basically reviews your contract. Whenever there is an investigators that are coming to you, one exception is if there is an investigator who's coming from, for example, the Board of Medicine. You really want a specialist. You want somebody who specializes exactly with the type of problem that is being investigated. So if you get criminal investigators, you really need a criminal defense attorney. For example, if it's federal or if it's state, federal criminal defense attorney, state criminal defense attorney. If it's a board investigation, you really need somebody who is very well attuned with board issues. And every field, there's specialists. So you really need to take your time and decide on basically the appropriate attorney that is going to address this. Also, seek help. So, for example, because of my experience, I started a service called SHIELD, Support and Help in Ethical Legal Defense. And basically, I provide advice to other physicians who are facing issues and tell them, listen, I will help you. I'll give you maybe the names of 3 or 4 different attorneys that you can interview and be able to decide which attorney do you want to retain. But specialization is very, very important. Like in medicine, in law, there are specialist attorneys who handle these issues that are pertinent to physicians, and there's specialty law firm that only caters to physicians.
Physicians understandably would be terrified if this happened to them, right? No training, authorities coming at them. Sometimes they may think that staying quiet makes them look guilty. How do you counsel physicians who think that way?
Basically, being quiet is your savior, because if something is going to happen and you want to be able to convey your side, let this happen in court. Let this happen in a deposition where it's controlled, where you have your attorney, where you're able to figure out exactly what you're saying and figure out exactly what is being investigated. So that's why I tell physicians, listen, hold any statement that you're going to make, and make sure that it's made with an attorney in the right time, because if you make any statements prematurely, basically it's going to be always used against you. So always save all statements, and staying silent is going to be something that's going to save you. It's not going to make you look guilty at all. Always invoke your Fifth Amendment rights. Always invoke your right to have an attorney present.
We're talking to Muhamad Aly Rifai about his book, Doctor Not Guilty. The Kevin MD excerpt is Physician Legal Rights, What to Do When Agents Knock. Muhammad, let's end with take-home messages they want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
My plea is very, very simple. Don't wait for the knock on the door to learn the rules. Learn the rules about your Fifth Amendment rights, about your Sixth Amendment rights, your right to remain silent, your right to have an attorney present, and your right basically to protect your life, to protect your liberty, to protect your license, to protect your family, and to protect your ability to practice and serve your patients.
Muhammad, thank you again for sharing your perspective and insight, and thanks again for coming back on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.